We're live, yes. What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Segura. Welcome to my weekly live Q&A. As you guys may know by now, I am a mixed martial arts reporter for MMAJunkie.com. And in this weekly live Q&A, I answer all your questions regarding the combat sports world and more. So yeah, that's basically the gist of this program. You guys submit questions via Twitter, and then I answer them. And then towards the end, towards the later part of this video, I answer your questions that are dropped on the YouTube live chat. So, like always, if you didn't get to ask questions via Twitter beforehand, don't worry, you'll get to do so live in the later part of this video via YouTube live chat. So, if you got questions, make sure you throw them on the chat. I already see a few questions queuing up on the live chat, so that's good. So yeah, let's get right into it. Sorry I'm late. Just been a little busy. Obviously, a lot going on right now. But yeah, just been busy and kind of fell back a few minutes behind. I'm sporting my Aguardiente Antioqueño shirt, always repping, you know, good old Colombian liquor, all right? So a lot has gone down this week. UFC 252 wrapped up, obviously, headline by a trilogy title fight between Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier, and there was also a few other big fights on that card. Then we got UFC on ESPN 15 this weekend, and we also have Bellator 244 as well on Friday. And on top of that, there's been also a good amount of news. So, like always, plenty to talk about. So yeah, just reminder, like, subscribe, you know the drill. And let's get into this right away. You can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram. Also, first time I actually remember to say this at the beginning of the video, the super chat is open. So if you want to support this channel and you want this to continue to grow and at least on a faster rate, donations would come a long way. So you have no obligation, just with your like and subscription, that's enough. But if you want to go the extra mile and donate a little bit of money to support this channel, the super chat is all yours to do that. All right. All right, let's get into this. 8 Passive Wokeness, unfortunately, kicking this thing off. And he asked, Sugar initial scans coming out good. Assume he has no major injury. Should he come back soon? Wait a while. And when he does, who does he fight? So good question by 8 Passive Wokeness. By the way, I got a haircut, so I don't look all that crazy anymore. Good question by 8 Passive Wokeness. So, apart from the trilogy bout that I mentioned here at the top with UFC 252, in the co-main event of that card, we saw Sugar Sean O'Malley, one of the UFC's brightest prospects. Certainly, I would actually say the most popular prospect. That'd be pretty fair to say, I think. Lost via first-round technical knockout to Marlon Chito Vera. And yeah, there was a little bit of controversy, I guess, and to the point that a passive wokeness is making here in the question. So he suffered some sort of leg, knee, foot injury. We're not quite sure. I haven't really seen much come out of it, but it looks like he's okay. But yeah, basically, Chito Vera landed a kick at the 3-minute mark, which that's also has been controversial. I also addressed it on my Spanish language podcast on Monday, Hablemos MMA. Go back and watch the footage, man. Around the exact moment is 2:54, remaining on the first round. But I encourage you to start watching from even before that. You watch the whole fight and just keep in mind that at 2:54 something goes down, just so you can see that was the point where things changed. Prior to 2:54 mark, O'Malley was moving well, was striking from both stances, was throwing a lot of kicks. Then 3 minutes remaining. And Marlon Vera, puts in a well-placed shot to the knee. It was a kick, and then you immediately see Sean O'Malley's face change. He immediately changes stances and puts his right leg back. And then, you see him try to put some weight behind that leg, and it's just not working out for him. And then from that point on, he's like against the cage, and you can see him be very hesitant about his mobility. And at one point, he even kind of stumbles, and Vera goes like, "What's up? Like, you good?" So basically, it seemed he suffered an injury, and a lot of people kind of were hating on Vera, saying it wasn't a legit win, this and that, when it was, because he caused the damage. He's the one that forced that injury on OMalley and then followed up and finished the fight. So it was pretty clean. It might not be what you wanted. It might not be a clean knockout or a crazy submission, but it's a path to victory, right? Like a path of wokeness. It is a way to win, and he won. Nothing illegal about that. Nothing cheap about that. It was fair and square. But anyways, so the question here is, OMalley suffering his first defeat is like, okay, what does the UFC do with him? When does he come back, and who does he fight against? Which is basically the question here from A Pass of Wokeness. So you guys know me. I mean, from all the stuff that I've been doing with this weekly live Q&A, as well as like my preview video work, not only now with MMA Junkie, but even with MMA Fighting, I'm always someone that likes to exercise caution. I'm always someone that is a fan of the boxing model as far as prospects are concerned, is a fan of tune-up fights, is a fan of slow build-up. Ultimately, I think that's the best way to develop talent. It might not be the best way to give fans the most exciting fights at all times, but certainly I think it's the best way to develop talent, which ultimately gives you a better product in the end, meaning better fights, better performances. So I'm all in for a slow build. Sean O'Malley is still just 25 years old. He just tasted his first defeat. It looks like he's got the skills to hang with ranked opposition, with top opposition. How high, we quite don't know. Top 5, I don't think so. Top 10, maybe. Top 15, certainly. Beating guys like Eddie Wineland and a few others that he's beat in the past, those guys seem to be top 15 caliber or just right outside of it, and he handled that pretty well. And Chito Vera, he might not be in the rankings, he probably is now, but at the time of the fight, he wasn't in the rankings, but he had that BS loss to Song Yadong, and prior to that, he was like on a 5-fight win streak, so with finishes, all finishes. So in my opinion, he should have been in the rankings anyways, and in that fight, it wasn't like Sean O'Malley looked like he was out of his league. In fact, he was having quite some success in that bout. So again, he seems like he can hang with the top 15 with ranked opposition. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that he should be fighting those guys. I always like to use this example. You can always add salt to your recipe later. You can always add salt to the finished product, but during the recipe, while you're cooking whatever it is that you're cooking, you once you added the salt, you can't go back. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things that once you rush someone and they suffer certain defeats that could crack their ego, crack their fighting spirit, or even hurt their body. A lot of those damages, you can't go back on them. Whereas a slow build, worst comes to worst, he just crashes crashes a bunch of cans. He just beats a lot of people in, just steamroll them, and then you go, okay, well, we can add a little bit more of resistance here. We can add a little bit of more challenges here. We can add a little bit of more names here. We can add a little bit of higher rankings. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of my feel. So for me, Sean O'Malley's still a very good prospect, not only because of his popularity, but also because of his technique and his fighting skills. I think the UFC should just take it slow with him. Kind of use the model that Bellator puts on MVP. Just put him in there to knock some people out. Have him, go 2-3 fights, knocking some guys out of the rankings. Have him develop his talents. Have him develop his brand a little bit further, and get used to being on the big spots. This was also his first big spot in the UFC. Obviously a co-main event of a pay-per-view, so a lot to deal with. I know we're in COVID time, so there's a lot of less, no fan interaction actually, and a lot less media. So certainly that takes away from, that experience and sort of the jitters. In fact, a few fighters have come out and say when they were fighting for the UFC, making their debut during these times, they haven't felt the jitters because there's no arena full of, thousands of people, screaming and yelling. So in that sense, it's a little bit better, but still. Take it slow. Give him some opponents that he can easily handle, and have him, keep developing his skills. He can always face ranked opposition, high-level opposition down the line. But you can't take back knockout losses. You can't take back these type of defeats. So yeah, there's also a pretty good argument that my former colleague Luke Thomas made on, I don't know if it was his show Morning Combat or his personal YouTube channel. I forget now, but it was something like, we also have to keep in mind is how, O'Malley has injuries before. He had that foot injury in the Andres Sukumtaj win and now this one. There's also questions about how durable is he. You know what I'm saying? And not to question his character. I think that's out of his. I think that's out of his control. How durable is his body? And in soccer it happens all the time. Like Falcao, I think in my opinion, obviously I'm biased because he's Colombian, and being a fellow countryman, and also I actually met him before, and I know his father. I used to train under his father. Um, he had a pretty successful career, obviously, in European football. In my opinion, was one of the best strikers when he was in his prime, but just injuries just derailed his career. Pretty bad injuries, and then he had a few knee injuries, and he just wasn't able to recover. Was never the same. That's probably the most one of the most famous examples as of recent time. But you see it in soccer all the time. You see it in other sports. The technique there is there, the skills there, but just the body doesn't hold up. And we know, obviously, with the sport being as physical as MMA. You got to have good genes. You got to be have a tough body. You have to have a body that can withstand damage, and not only that, but recover. So there's questions about that. I don't think they're too strong because again, it's not like he's getting injured all the time. Say like a Cain Velasquez or someone, but he is young and he seems to having some struggles here at the beginning, at least with his body. So put him in an easy fight, have him knock a few people out, then bump him back in the rankings. Quite simple. But in my opinion, the UFC should take it slow with Sean O'Malley. Because, imagine if they put him in another high-profile fight after this and then he gets another defeat, which is not far-fetched, right? It's the UFC. It's game. Anyone can win. That'd be 2 defeats in a row. I mean, that has to hurt your brand, especially O'Malley, who part of his brand is also winning. He talks smack, he talks trash, he's very confident in his skills. It almost feels like he already knows he's going to win. And when you have that and you're losing, certainly the promotional appeal that there's to that sort of style of promoting yourself certainly loses some sort of value. So, in my opinion, take it slow with O'Malley. No rush. He's just 25 years old. He'll be fine. Good question, A Passive Wokeness. All right, this is a long one. This is a 3-part question by the Executioner. He's getting quite comfortable making these long questions, which I enjoy. Now, I didn't include the full thing here because, as you can see, it's already taken most of my screen, so I wasn't able to fit everything. But, anyways, he basically on the first part of this question posted a screenshot of someone who said that Marlon Chito Vera is far more marketable than Sean O'Malley and could be a bigger star. And the Executioner writes back, I disagree with the statement. Sugar Sean appeals to much more broader mainstream audience. A lot of his marketing he does by himself too. I respect Vera, but O'Malley has done a lot of his own brand that is overlooked. Can we talk about marketing fighters? When we hear the term this fighter is not being marketed, what does it actually mean? Doesn't not marketing a fighter also hurt the UFC? Conor was pushed, but he put in a lot of work by himself. Do fighters rely too much on the UFC to do something for their image? Why does media immediately point to the UFC for not marketing a fighter, since MMA is an individual sport? And I think fighter plays a big part in creating an image the UFC can push. Thoughts? All right, so there's a bunch of questions within that whole series. Good questions, and frankly, something I actually enjoy talking about. Sort of the marketing side of things. That's, I guess, the way my brain works. But so let's start with the very beginning. So I do also disagree with that statement, and take it for someone that has a Spanish language podcast, someone that has an eye specifically on the Latino market, on the Hispanic side of things. So a lot of people would probably call me biased towards those fighters, and probably rightfully so. It's fair, obviously, having a stronger relationship with those fighters, speaking the language as well, being also Hispanic and Latino. Obviously, in some sort of way, it compromises you a little bit into maybe perhaps being a little bit biased, right? But even then, I think with that in mind, and everyone should keep always everyone's background in mind and what kind of ties or what kind of ties they could have to a specific point, right? I think that's That's something that needs to be kept in mind when anyone's reporting, right? Their biases. So keep that in mind, right? But I always try to be as fair as possible. I always try to call things how they are. I always try to basically, say my points. You may or may not agree with them, but at least I'll try to make an educated point, and not only that, but also have receipts. I'm not just gonna say things to say them. I'm not just gonna say things to support and push the Latino fighters, because that's not my job. Again, I'm not a promoter. I'm a journalist. But so being honest here, I really don't think that Vera is far more marketable than Sean O'Malley. I do think that Vera might be under marketed, if that's even a word. I think Vera's potential to be a star is great. I think that Vera has a high ceiling to become a player and a star at 135 pounds and for the UFC. And I think the UFC's probably not giving him the right push, or maybe starting to with this O'Malley fight. But anyways, for the first part of this question, I disagree. I think O'Malley is just a bigger draw. He's someone that likes to do media. He's someone that does media on his own through his YouTube channel. He's also someone that has a Twitch channel and is big on that as well. And he's someone that's young and appeals to a wide range of audiences. He also smokes pot. Has a I think Chito does. I don't know. But I think at least just publicly, he's just more out there. To be honest, Chito Vera doesn't like this whole trash talk era. He said it. He said it to me multiple times. He said it after this fight. He's like, yo, I like to fight. I like to go in there and scrap. You can talk all this shit, but at the end of the day, it's just words. It's air. It doesn't mean anything. Like, the end goal is a fight, and that's what I'm focused on. I'm not focused on anything else. And I respect that mentality. That's certainly a mentality that I also appreciate and I like, but we have to admit that it's one that perhaps might not get you, or might not be the best. It can get you some fans for sure, because some fans would also appreciate that mentality as well. But it's probably not the best mentality to get you the most fans possible or the biggest following possible, right? Because the biggest following possible, you just have to be out there. You just have to do a lot of content, whether it's on your own on social media, whether it's interviews, whatever it is. And O'Malley does that. So that in itself is going to hinder Chito, his dislike of the trash talk, and his dislike of just doing promotion in that sort of sense. He's down to do promotion on his own way, but not on that type of way, which we know gets the most clicks. Because I work in MMA media, usually the articles that click the most and do that is when there's some serious beef, a lot of trash talk, and all that. So yeah, I would disagree with that. But like I said, I do think that Marlon Chito Vera has a huge potential. I think being the only Ecuadorian fighter, I have a lot of Ecuadorian friends that don't watch MMA, and they were posting on their Instagram stories and they were celebrating Chito Vera's victory. Why? Because it's their countryman. It's their guy. You know what I'm saying? So when you see your flag somewhere, and I'm sure Americans can relate to this, or if you're from somewhere else outside of America, you could probably relate to this. At least personally, when I see, maybe it's different for Americans, because the U.S. is such a big country and has so much influence that it's kind of normal to see the U.S. succeed in the Olympics, succeed internationally in all kinds, in not only sports but in all kinds of things, right? American culture it's a culture that that's very strong and influences a lot of countries, right? Me coming from Colombia, a fairly small country, also Ecuador being a small country, when I see my flag, whether it's in sports, whatever it is, there's a sense of pride, there's a sense of recognition, there's a sense of, it's kind of hard to describe, but like I'll give you a good example. I'm not into cycling all that much, but like when a few Colombians have had success, internationally, like Nairo and a few others, like Bernal as well, like I'm always congratulating those guys and all that, and I'm not even cycling. So very much the case here. Like, he has a country behind him. The president of Ecuador was tweeting and congratulating Chito Vera. You know what I'm saying? So if you're trying to expand into the Latin American market, he's the guy that will unlock you that whole country, because he's the only guy. So I think there's obviously a lot of big opportunities there for the UFC to push Vera and kind of make him a star in the Latin American market and gain a lot of Latin American fans, So I think he has a huge potential. But anyways, I know I'm going on a rant here, but on the second part of this question, can we talk about the marketing of fighters? when we hear this fighter's not being marketed, what does it actually mean? So it means a few things. For example, last night there was a Twitch stream of Dominic Reyes playing the new UFC video game. So that's a way of marketing. The UFC also, at least pre-pandemic, they had these fan Q&As right after the weigh-ins or before the weigh-ins, right, of big events. And, they got to hit up fighters and fly them out there and pay them their hotel, their stay, and all that. That's the UFC marketing. For example, I remember when Michelle Waterson was in a nice little win streak and making a campaign to get a title shot at strawweight. They had her on the UFC broadcast as well. I mean, there's so many little things here and there as far as like fan Q&As, fan events, live stream Twitch with the new UFC video game. A special feature on the YouTube channel, this, that, all those things the UFC can do to push a fighter. So if they say a fighter's not being marketed enough, is maybe that the UFC is not exercising sort of those options and not keeping that fighter in mind for these type of opportunities, which are limited. Not everyone can get them. That's from sort of a traditional marketing standpoint. Another easy way that the UFC can market someone is card placement. Sean O'Malley was fighting in the co-main event of a big pay-per-view, UFC 252. That's marketing. That's putting him in a big stage. Why? Because there might be a lot of casuals that buy the pay-per-view and might not watch the prelims, right? The ESPN Plus prelims, the preliminary card. It starts too early. They're at our friends drinking this, that, having some food, etc. And they're just there for the main fight, maybe co-main event, maybe a fight before that, and maybe they'll kind of tune in and out from the opening bout of the card and stuff like that. So the higher the placement, card placement is important. Also, what type of card are you putting them on, right? Are you putting them in a small fight night that's barely had any promotion, because that's what it is, a small fight night? Or are you putting them on the freaking co-main event of UFC 252, right? So that is part of marketing as well, card placement. And also opponent. Matchmaking is, fight. I mean, this has been said many times, styles make fights. So if you're constantly being put in fights where, there's certain fighters, and I'm not going to call anyone out here, but there's certain fighters that usually tend to make fights slower paced, or, what a fan would say boring. If you give them those type of matchups all the time, it's going to be hard for them to shine, right? But if you give them matchups that could be potentially exciting for their style, that's a way of marketing it as well, because, that's putting them in a situation where they can have or have better odds of having a good performance and gaining fans. Also, names as well, fighting former champs, fighting guys with big followings as well. You know what I'm saying? That's all marketing. A good way of a good example of that is when they matched up Johnny Hendricks versus Bohachinha. It was kind of clear that Hendricks was on his way out. Bohachinha was the fresh face of 185 pounds. Good-looking guy, strong, very skilled, very exciting style as well. Let's put him up against the former champ who everybody knows. So, the media gets more attention because it's a better matchup, or not a better matchup, but a higher profile matchup, all that. So matchmaking and card placement outside of the traditional marketing standpoints can also be a tool to market fighters for the UFC. So when you say, it's only, and I kind of agree with you, executioner, but not 100%, but when you say like it's only it's up to the fighter 100% to market themselves. No, the UFC has, it's both. The UFC has a big say in that, but like also the way you carry yourself, the way you do media, your appeal. If you have simply the it factor, some people have it and some people don't. How much media are you willing to do? Some people just don't like doing media at all. And how you carry yourself on social media and all that. That's also part of marketing, and that lands on the fighter. But it's definitely not a two-way street, but it's definitely a two-way operation here. It's the UFC giving you a push and helping you out, and also what you can do on your own. And that doesn't mean if you don't have either, you won't be successful. There's guys that only get pushed by the UFC and don't really do a good job on their own. They're successful. There's guys that they don't get the push by the UFC, but they do a really good job on their own, and they're successful. There's guys that try to do both, and they're not successful. So, it's one of those things. And for the last part of this question, do fighters rely too much on the UFC to do something for their image? Some do. Why does the media immediately point to the UFC for not marketing the fighters? And since MMA is an individual sport, and I think a fighter plays a big part in creating an image the UFC can push. Thoughts? Yeah, certainly. If you have something that you can offer, the UFC can pick up on that and push, right? And push that. Look at Sage Northcutt when the UFC was pushing him a shit ton. It wasn't that the UFC just wanted Sage Northcutt to, get a lot of attention and all that just because of nothing. No, Sage Northcutt is a ridiculous athlete, can do like crazy backflips. His personality is quite interesting, right? He's like this super nice guy, like kind of just seems like a perfect human being, to be honest. Very young as well, very exciting style too, promising, right? Also, age is a big factor, right? Does the UFC want to put a lot of their resources, marketing resources, into someone that may only have 2-3 years left in their career? Or would they want to do that into someone that may have a 10-year career ahead of them, right? It's kind of like investments. So yeah, there's a lot of factors involved, but I do think that maybe some fighters do rely too much on the UFC to do something for their image, but I also feel like a lot of them do recognize that they can do a lot for themselves, and they do. That's why social media is very prevalent. Jeez, that was a long question. Hopefully I answered your stuff. I know I went on a little bit of a rant here, but I like talking about these kind of things. Kind of like the business aspect of mixed martial arts. Like always, subscribe, like, you know the drill. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that breakdown with Brian Kelleher. Now, as you guys may know, I usually try to do the breakdown and reaction with the same fighter. And for this UFC 252 card, I didn't have a reaction for it. So obviously I didn't have Brian Kelleher. But yeah, I had to work on Sunday, and then I had to get the podcast ready for Monday, so I was really busy. So wasn't able to do that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the little preview show. Kelleher, he's got great insight. He's a huge fan of the sport, so he follows everything. So someone that you can ask him just about anything. You can literally probably talk to him right now and ask him about some things that are happening, and he has an opinion on it. Very informed. So always love talking to that guy. More of that to come, stuff like that. So make sure you subscribe, like, and follow over here. You know what I'm saying? Also, Super Chat is open. Just saying. All right. Liam O'Brien asks, what should be next for Jarrazino Rozenstruik? Should the UFC give him a style-friendly fight in Lewis, or wait for the result of other fights like Volkov versus Harris or Overeem versus Sakai? So yeah, Jarrazino Rozenstruik picking up a very good win here on Saturday, defeating former UFC champion Junior Dos Santos via second round knockout. Was it TKO? Second round TKO? Might have been third. Yeah, second round TKO. Very impressive victory. I think Rozenstruik is a very exciting fighter in that division. A guy with very precise striking, with a lot of power, good chin. I know he got knocked out by Ngannou, but Ngannou can literally knock out a horse. Good chin, durable. Can go the distance. Experienced striker, good technique, power, fairly quick for a heavyweight. Good movement. Just all around a very good fighter at heavyweight. So I like his style. I'm a fan of his style, and I gotta say, I don't understand why a lot of people hate on the guy. I really don't, because I've interviewed him several times in the past, and whenever a story goes out, everyone's either roasting him because he got knocked out by Ngannou, or even prior to the knockout, roasting him for calling out Ngannou and saying, "Who do you think you are?" and all this and that. And I don't get it, because then you got guys like freaking 8 Paths of Wokeness, like calling people out and roasting people for ducking fights. So which is it? What do you want? Fighters to duck fights and avoid certain fighters, or be selective about who they fight? Or do you want guys to call out the biggest and scariest guys in the division? I don't get it. So anyways, neither here or there. As far as what's next for Rozenstruik, a nice victory for him, adding Junior Dos Santos to your record at this point in time. It might not be what it once was, but it's certainly still a nice little accolade that can go on your record, because Junior Dos Santos really only loses to the best of the best. I mean, if you're a decent fighter, you're most likely going to lose to Junior Dos Santos. You have to be a damn good fighter to defeat Junior Dos Santos. I mean, I'm just going to read you his UFC defeats. So he's lost to Cain Velasquez twice. He's lost to Alistair Overeem. He's lost to Stipe Miocic. He's lost to Francis Ngannou. He's lost to Curtis Blades. and now Jarrazino, Rozenstruik. Those are his only defeats. So he lost to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys. Two of those one's the current champion, one's a former champion, one challenged for the title and was a champion, K1 champion and longtime veteran, Alistair Overeem. Ngannou, another guy that challenged for the belt. Curtis Blades, who's up there, potentially. You could make a case that maybe he deserves a title shot right now. I think it's Ngannou, but anyways, he's up there. And now Rozenstruik. So he's a guy that only loses to the very best. So to beat Francis Ngannou certainly says a lot about Jarrazino, Rozenstruik. And yeah, I don't know exactly what's next for him. I think the heavyweight division is kind of in a rough spot right now. If you're a title contender, I think it's good if you're climbing up the rankings. But if you're a title contender, I think you're kind of in a rough spot here because, again, Stipe Miocic took a long time to defend his belt. Again, he was injured and then the global pandemic, so you can't really blame him. But the fact is, a lot of time went by without that belt being defended. So it kind of created a logjam in the heavyweight division. So Stipe, wins. Apparently, he's not retiring. He's going to fight again. I don't suspect he's not the most active champion in the world. So I don't suspect he'll be fighting. He'll get a quick turnaround. I think, he's healthy. He's comfortable training in the pandemic now, so he will eventually defend his belt, but I don't know how soon. And it seems, again, that Jon Jones has interest in moving up and fighting Stipe. So that could delay things for heavyweight contenders. And then on top of that, you got a lengthy line with, in my opinion, this is how kind of the order. Francis Ngannou, Curtis Blades, Derek Lewis, and then probably Jarrazino, Rozenstruik. So a long line. So tough situation for Rozenstruik. Certainly would have to take another fight in order to even be considered for the title shot, maybe even two. So in my opinion, I think a fight with Derek Lewis makes sense. Either Derek Lewis or Curtis Blades. Now, yeah, I think those two. I think Francis Ngannou at this point should just wait for his title shot. I think he's clearly proven that he's the guy to challenge. I think there's probably a lot of interest in watching that Stipe rematch. I know the first one was kind of one-sided for Miocic, but I think given his previous performances, I think a lot of people would be interested in watching that again. And so I think a fight with Derek Lewis would make a lot of sense. It'd be quite fun, actually. A fight with Curtis Blades would also make a lot of sense, and probably a good test as well because we haven't really seen him against a very solid wrestler. Now, Alistair Overeem can grapple, but not like Curtis Blades, so that'd be interesting as well. So, I think either of those two, Derek Lewis or Curtis Blades, are probably good options for Jarrazino Rozenstruik. Now, if he ends up fighting just another big name down the line, down the rankings, that's fine as well. Again, he's in a spot where there is literally no rush because the logjam is so heavy, so he can do whatever he wants. All right, a passive wokeness again. So this question is, and the next following questions are tied up to Jon Jones announcing on Twitter that he's vacated his light heavyweight belt, and it looks like after a very positive conversation, he's going to be, or his future is at heavyweight. So we'll see. We don't know if that's true or not. The UFC has yet to confirm it. So we don't even know if he's the champion or not at 205 pounds. Who knows? And we don't even know if he's going to go up to heavyweight. But just keep that in mind. He said that on Twitter. So anyways, A Passive Wokeness asks, should Jon versus Reyes be for the vacant belt? Or Santos versus Glover be for the belt? Or winner of both and then fight for the title? Basically, should the 205 be put into circulation immediately or not until the year end or even possibly next year for winners to match up timetables? So I think really this is a very simple question. I think it really comes down to whether or not Jon Jones is still light heavyweight champion. To me, it's kind of odd, I would say, that he decided to vacate his belt without having a title shot booked at 205 pounds, because we know, once you're a champion, you get championship money, you get that, that cut of the pay-per-view. I'm sure Jones would too, given he's a star, but But I would assume he wouldn't like to leave one without knowing the other is secure. You know what I'm saying? So now I'm not saying that I don't believe that he's vacated his belt, but I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC comes out and says no, he's still champion and he's going to defend his belt, or he's still champion but he's moving up to heavyweight or something like that. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, and we won't only know until the UFC confirms that. But yeah, I think it all comes down to what happens with that. If Jon Jones did indeed vacate his belt and he's moving up to heavyweight, I think a fight versus Jon versus Reyes would make a lot of sense. I think right now, if you had to choose a contender for Jon Jones, it'd be between those two. Probably more Dominic Reyes, but also Jan Blachowicz has made has had a quite impressive performances as of late. Obviously defeating Corey Anderson. Prior to that, Luke Rockhold. So he's on a nice little run, and he's certainly up there as well. So I think it's a no-brainer. Those two have to fight for the vacant belt. And put Santos versus Glover on the same card. That'd be title eliminator. I think that makes sense. And as far as whether the circulation of the belt should be immediate or not, I think it should be immediate just as long as we know for sure that Jon Jones has vacated his belt. As soon as that's made official, the UFC, says Jon Jones is no longer UFC light heavyweight champion, announce the fight. Announce the vacant, the title fight for the vacant belt. That's the way it should work. Michael Terrell, what's the correlation, if there is one, with Jon Jones' belt vacancy and Rumble Johnson's return? So I saw a lot of people go on Twitter and be like, oh yeah, Jon Jones vacating the belt, has like moved so many things around, right? This, that. One of that being, Brett Okamoto from ESPN reported, again, and this is not 100%, reported that Anthony Rumble Johnson is back in the USADA testing pool, and then he plans to come back. That's very different from Anthony Rumble Johnson has a fight booked and he is making his return on this date, on this card against this opponent. You could easily be in the USADA testing pool. Uriah Faber's still in the USADA testing pool. George St. Pierre, I think George St. Pierre got removed from the testing pool. But there are fighters that stay in the testing pool and don't fight, so that doesn't necessarily mean a comeback is happening for Anthony Rumble Johnson, but it seems like it is. And he's talked about this for a while. I mean, this has been no secret. It's been kind of out in the open. So I don't think he went, Jon Jones is moving up to heavyweight. I'm back in the mix and I'm jumping back in the division. I don't think that's what happened here. Like I said, this has been talked about for a long time, so we knew in some way this was coming. I don't think this announcement from Brett caught anyone by surprise. I don't think so. I think people kind of knew that this was coming, or at least heard that there was interest in a potential return. And and Rumble has actually said that when he was out, he said, I would only come back if it was to fight Jon Jones. For some weird reason, he really wants to test himself against Jon Jones. I mean, not weird, but I'm sure he wants to test himself against the best of the best. All fighters do. So on that end, it makes sense. And obviously, he's the champion as well. But it's really not, from at least from what I kind of, the sense that I got from him, it was more about fighting actually Jon Jones and fighting kind of the GOAT rather than fighting for the belt. Usually it's the other way around. Fighters are like, I don't care. Ultimately, I don't care who I fight. I want to get a hold of the belt. That's my goal, to become champion, not to beat so and so. But anyways, I mean, I'm sure Rumble Johnson looks at this and sees it's good news for him, right? In some sort of way, because Jon Jones is a big threat. So I think it makes things a little bit easier at 205. But there's still very, very good fighters there. But yeah, I don't think he solely based his return on Jon Jones vacating the belt. Also, you gotta assume like there's a lot of bureaucracy in this whole thing. So like jumping back in the USADA testing pool, there's a lot of paperwork and probably a lot of there's protocols probably that need to be in place and things that you gotta follow before actually being 100% in the pool. And that might take days. I don't know how long the process is, but it wasn't like the tweet went out and they're like, okay, he's back in the testing pool, because it was announced literally like an hour after. No, I think this has been in the works for some time. All right, Izzy fight card seems weak even with Reyes versus Jan and Cowboy added. Will they try to add some more or just try to sell the main event? I have no idea. But I don't think it's all that weak, to be quite honest, say Passive Wokeness. First of all, that main event, Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa, is a phenomenal, it's a phenomenal main event. So it's pretty good card there. Let's see. So UFC 253 taking place on September 26th. Location to be determined. I don't know, dude. So far, it looks pretty damn good. I think you are. I think it might even be better than this UFC 252 card that we saw over the weekend. Dominic Reyes versus Jan Blachowicz, good matchup. Johnny Walker versus Ryan Spann. Johnny Walker's an entertainer, so great bout. Jordan Espinosa versus David Dorak. I don't know if I mispronounced it. Casey Kenny versus Haley Alating. Shamil versus Cyril Gane. Cyril Gane, an interesting prospect at heavyweight. Ronda Marcus versus Mackenzie Dern. Kai Kara-France versus Brandon Royval. Hakeem Dawodu versus Zubara Tukugov. Claudia Gadella versus Yan Jionan. And then Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. That's a decent card. I mean, it's not like the best pay-per-view we've ever seen, but I wouldn't say it's a weak pay-per-view. I would say UFC 250 was weaker. You could make a case that maybe even UFC 252 this weekend was weaker as well. So I think that's a pretty decent card. Again, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. You can't really get too picky. I know you're paying money for this, so you kind of can, but we're in a global pandemic. Like you can't expect the UFC to be in some sort of way they're being hindered by this. And even then, they're still putting on good fights, right? Nothing is full throttle right now, during this coronavirus thing. Nothing is. All right, two more real quick so I can do some YouTube questions. Thoughts on Lionheart's comeback? Who the hell is he fighting again? Anthony Smith. He's fighting soon. In September, I think. Man, there's so much news that it's hard to keep up. So he's fighting... Oh, no, he's fighting August 29th. Yeah, UFC Fight Night 175, aka UFC on ESPN Plus 33. Yes, he's fighting Alexander Rakic. Alexander Rakic. Yeah, that's a tough fight. But what can I say? I mean, his last performance, that was a bad beating that Glover gave him, and you would want him to take some time off. But again, he took a bad beating, but it wasn't like he was knocked out cold, right? And it's been some time. I mean, how many months has it been? This global pandemic has really shifted and warped my perception on time. Sometimes I think things happened last week and it was months ago. Sometimes I think things happened months ago and it was last week. So it's back in May. I mean, from May to August, yeah, that's a decent amount of time to recover. He served the mandatory suspension that the commission gave him. I think it's fine. And then, he's main eventing, obviously being a former title challenger, one of the bigger names in the division. That's fine. He's used to being in the spotlight, so I don't think that's an issue. But it kind of would have been nice for him to rally back from that hard loss, kind of in a low-key spot. But it's still a smaller card, too. So, yeah, I don't mind it. I mean, it is a tough fight, but again, he's not fighting someone top 5. And Rakic is coming off a loss as well against Volkan Ozdemir. So it makes sense. I'm in favor for that fight. All right, last Twitter question, and this is by Sanyan Jain. And I believe he might be new to asking questions, or maybe I don't remember him. I don't know. Certainly no A passive wokeness. And he asks here, any information on how USADA are drug testing newcomers who have competed since UFC 249, if they've completed the mandatory time of being in the testing pool before competing for the first time. So in this global pandemic, I'm sure testing also has been hindered. I wonder if they're sending things by mail or they're actually doing things in person. They did release a statement a while ago about that, but I don't quite remember what exactly it detailed. And as far as the testing pool, there's a lot of guys taking like literally fights the week of, or even a couple of days before that, and they're able to kind of surpass the get by the testing, being 6 months into the testing pool. So I think that only comes to like fighters that sign with the UFC. Actually, I don't even know. That's a good question. I'm gonna follow up on that and check out sort of the details of that policy, because I know there's fighters that have tested positive for prohibited substances and have been banned for a year or two, and without them even making their UFC debut. So I do wonder about that, but certainly at this point in time, it's not stopping fighters from taking short notice fights and joining the promotion within a week. It could come out that testing later on reveals that that person popped for whatever, but fighting for the first time, like you can take a short notice fight and be completely fine. Like USADA's not gonna hold you back. All right, that does it for the Twitter questions. I know I went long on these. That was the Executioner 91's fault for that long ass question. So technically we got like what, 10 minutes left. So I'm gonna answer questions now on the YouTube live chat. So again, if you didn't get to ask on Twitter, you want in on this program, now's your time to throw stuff on the YouTube live chat. Like always, remember, follow me over here at Danny Segura TV, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everything. And yeah, hit the like button, subscribe, tell your friends about it. All right, let's see here. You said Lawler needs fun fights, fun matchups, and not too big challenges. Is his next fight like that? Yeah, it kind of is. I mean, keep in mind he took that fight on short notice. So not this weekend, but the following weekend, we will see Robbie Lawler fight Magny in the co-main event of UFC on ESPN Plus 33. Now that wasn't Magny's original opponent, from what I understand. It was Geoff Neal, but Geoff Neal had a pretty bad health scare. Apparently, he had some pretty bad pneumonia that developed into sepsis, which is like an infection in the bloodstream or something like that, and it got pretty scary for him. Apparently he almost died, according to him. And instead of scrapping that fight, Magny stayed on the card, and then Robbie Lawler stepped up. So keep in mind, is short notice. Is not like the UFC matched these two up ahead of time. So I do think he should be in bigger fights, in the sense of fighting guys that are former champions and kind of fun fights in that way, as far as name wise. But I think styles wise, again, Magny is a very good guy, but he's not super top. I mean, I assume he's in the rankings right now. I don't know. Let me check. Probably in the top 15. I don't think in the top 10 though. But he's a veteran. He's obviously proven that he's one of the better guys in that division for quite some time. Yeah, Magny's ranked 14. That makes sense. And Robbie Lawler's 13. So rankings wise, this fight makes sense. Two veterans, two kind of OGs. Probably Lawler a little bit more OG than Magny, but I would consider Magny pretty. I mean, he's pretty seasoned by this point, to be quite honest. And styles wise, Magny always brings it. He has a fun style, rangy, long, a lot of volume. Lawler's the shorter guy, shorter arms, more power. I assume he's going to want to get inside of the pocket and kind of land shots in close quarter. So I think it's a good fight. I actually like this fight very much. And even if this wasn't a short notice fight and it was something they booked, this was by Amy Wee. I forgot to feature the question. I think I would have been fine with it too. So yeah, this is a fine fight. This is a good fight. I like it. All right, so given yesterday's news, this is a question by JP. Do you think Stipe versus Jones or Stipe versus Francis? If you make Stipe versus Francis, does Jon fight in the meantime, or just pack on some pounds? Yeah, that's a tough one. From what Jones was tweeting yesterday, it certainly sounded like he's looking forward to fighting at heavyweight, but he's certainly taking it seriously, and it seems that he's going to go through some, he's going to hit the weights, and he's going to go through a bulking period and get his body ready for heavyweight, which is smart. So if that's the case and he wants to take some time, I think, you make Stipe versus Francis, and that's going to be a win-win, because if Stipe wins, I already think he's the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. But if he beats Francis again, defends his title one more time, that just has to make it absolutely unquestionable that he's the greatest heavyweight of all time by far. And if that's the case, you're gonna get one of the greatest of all time, pound for pound, also the greatest by far UFC light heavyweight champion in the history of the company versus the greatest UFC heavyweight champion in the history of the company. So that in itself is going to be a huge fight. Boom, I'm about it. And then if Francis wins, shit, Francis versus Jones, I mean, I don't really have to break it down to you to tell you that it's going to be an amazing fight and certainly a very interesting fight because it'd be fighting like, not that Miocic is not a true heavyweight, but I think Ngannou encapsulates your sort of your the image that everyone has in their mind of a heavyweight, sort of the stereotypical or what a heavyweight should be, which is just massive size and crazy amount of knockout power. So yeah, I'm all about Jones versus Francis Ngannou. So either or is a win-win, and either or will be a big fight for Jon Jones. So I think that's the route that you take. Give Jones some time to acclimate to heavyweight, to sort of make the right adjustments to his body and to his training camp, so he can be a successful heavyweight and be in the best or most optimal condition to fight in the bigger weight class. And then also with that as well, you don't disrupt the line. You don't disrupt the rankings, because we know that can have detrimental consequences on the division down the line. So you respect the rankings. You give Jones some time to get ready for heavyweight, and then you just make Jones' heavyweight debut bigger than what it would have been otherwise, because it's either against champion Ngannou or the greatest heavyweight of all time. So it's a win-win. So I think that's the route that they should go if indeed Jon Jones has vacated his light heavyweight belt and is moving up to heavyweight. Like I said, it hasn't been made official by the UFC. All right, Nicholas Thompson. Who in the top 10 would you match Chito Vera? Plus, with a speedy recovery, anyone in mind for OMalley? So I would get a little bit more picky with Vera because, again, he's like 6-1 in his past 7 performances, or 5-1 in his past 6. Let me make sure. Yeah, he's 6-1 in his past 7 performances. Within those performances in his last 3, he's won fight of the night and also a performance of the night bonus. He defeated Sean O'Malley in the co-main event of a UFC pay-per-view. I mean, he's in a great position right now, and he told me in Hablemos MMA, my Spanish language podcast with MMA Junkie, he told me that a win over him would put him in the top 5 of the division, or at least give him a top 5 next. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I mean, if the UFC does go that route, awesome. But, more power to Chito Vera, and I think he's a hard worker, and he's currently on a nice little streak, and certainly deserves that. But I don't know how possible that is. But certainly you can't deny him from a top 10, or at least someone high up in the top 10, like 6 or 7. So in my opinion, or at least like a name, like a legend, like a Uriah Faber or someone like that, or Dominic Cruz or something. So I'm looking at the rankings right now. I think, Cody Garbrandt is doing his thing at 125. Sterling should be fighting for the belt, but we'll see what happens there. UFC hasn't made anything official. Corey Sandhagen is fighting Marlon Moraes. So right there, the top 4 of the division is out. So Sandhagen is 4, fighting number 1, Moraes. Cody Garbrandt is number 3, fighting for the 125-pound belt. Sterling number 2, but he should fight for the belt. And then you got number 5. He's fighting Pedro Munoz. I mean, number 5 is Pedro Munoz, and he's fighting Frankie Edgar next weekend or this weekend. Next weekend. Let me just make sure. This weekend, yeah. No, yeah. What am I talking about? Yeah, he's fighting him this weekend. So we'll get some sort of resolution there. Look, I think a fight with Dominic Cruz would make sense. He's ranked 11. I think a fight with Jimmy Rivera, I still want to see that. They've tried to book that several times. There's bad blood. It's a good matchup for both. Jimmy Rivera's high up in the rankings, ranked number 7. I'd actually like to see Jimmy Rivera. I think that fight is the fight to make, to be honest. That or like a Uriah Faber, because he's got a little bit of a bone to pick with Faber, because Faber was kind of a replacement opponent because Sang Yudong wasn't 100% in the fight. I think he has some visa issues, so that fight was kind of rumored for a second. I think Uriah Faber or Jimmy Rivera should be next for Chito Vera. And as far as go slow with the guy, just 25 years old, put him in a good situation where he's able to bounce back from defeat. He has a lot of potential. So he's ranked 14th right now. I think a fight with Rob Font. I know I just said keep him out of the rankings, but he's in the top 10. That would be fun. Who else comes to mind in that division? Anybody really at this point. I mean, I think with his matchmaking coming off of defeat, for those kind of situations, you don't get too picky. You get pickies when a guy's in a streak, when a guy, is high up in the rankings, and yeah, he's coming off some good wins. So OMalley, anything goes, really. Not too picky about that one. Do you think Khabib versus GSP may actually happen, or would you rather see Khabib versus Usman? I don't think it happens. GSP Khabib does not happen. I'm not saying. I think it's unlikely, but I think there's obviously a little bit of a chance, especially with the scenario that Khabib presented in the sense of I want to go 30-0 and retire. I don't see myself continuing in this sport for a very long time. So defend my belts against Khabib because I have to, and then on my way out, let's just make a super fight, a one-off against GSP. F it. I think that makes sense. But again, GSP's almost 40 years old. He's 39, and I believe he might be turning 40 somewhat soon. So he's never also made 155. It just doesn't seem likely. It just doesn't seem likely. But you never know. You never know. But I don't think it happens. Khabib versus GSP, I don't think it happens. Crazier things have happened. And would I rather see Khabib versus Usman? For whatever reason, Khabib versus Usman doesn't really interest me all that much. I mean, I'm sure if they book it, I'd be excited. If it happens, I'd watch it. Obviously, it's my job. But it's not a fight I'm calling for. Not necessarily. I think there's plenty of guys. Shit. I'd rather see Tony Ferguson versus Khabib over Khabib versus Usman, to be quite honest with you. All right. David Lackaby. Any news on Ortega? In December, it will be 2 years since the loss to Max. Is he injured? Seen rumors of a fight of Zombie, but nothing confirmed. Yeah, so Cesar Legaspi from Milenio is a Mexican news outlet. Reported that Korean Zombie is gonna fight Brian Ortega. I forgot what date he reported it for, but the UFC certainly hasn't confirmed anything, and I haven't seen further confirmation anywhere else. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. I'm just telling you what he reported. So yeah, there are rumors that it's happening. And yeah, it's been last time he fought was December 2018. So it's been quite some time. To be honest, I hate this fight for Ortega. I know that he wants to get back in there probably and get back in the mix and get a big win over somebody that's high up in the rankings. But again, you guys know me. I like to exercise caution at all times. I also think that Ortega might not be as young of he's not even a prospect anymore, but he's still someone that's very young in the game, someone that has, I think, a long career ahead of him. And yeah, it's just best luck. You had a pretty bad defeat against Max Holloway. You haven't fought in 2 years. Just take someone, fight someone kind of like down in the rankings and build your way back up slowly. Get that confidence back in you. Get that rhythm of being in a fight camp and being, fight ready, get used to that again, all that good stuff. But to jump straight into a Korean Zombie fight, I'm not saying he can't win it because he's certainly capable of winning that fight. I just think that you're not putting. I just think it's risky, But again, the reward is quite big. You obviously beat someone in the top 5 of the division, and that has to put you up there. So yeah. We'll see what happens. I'll try to find out some stuff. If I do, obviously it'll be on MMAJunkie.com. So stay tuned. Follow me on Twitter for any of that stuff right here. All right, I'll take one more and dip out because I know I started a little bit late. Mr. Rojo asking, Chito's reaction to the win suggested OMalley and his corner had gotten to him in the build-up. What specifically had he taken to heart so badly? I don't think it had gotten to him. I mean, it all depends what you define it had gotten to him, right? Like, what does that mean to you? In my opinion, like, if something got to you, it's kind of like it threw you off, kind of like Conor McGregor getting into his opponent's heads and getting a reaction out of them in the build-up and have them fight sort of out of character and stuff like that. That's when you get to someone, in my opinion. Vera stayed chill and composed the entire time, and then afterwards, after he beat him, he talked shit, but it was more like "and I told you so," shut the fuck up type of thing. It wasn't really a. I don't think it got to him. Again, we saw a very composed and very calm Vera leading up to the fight, so I don't think it got to him. But that's not to say he still hears the comments and stuff like that. So once he does get a win, it's a little petty, but understandable. I mean, I would probably do that too. I think most of you would. You kind of rub it on the face. Oh, you see, you talk all this shit. Look what happened. But I don't think it got to him. I don't think he took it to heart like really badly. But yeah, basically like he was being underestimated, and I asked him that, and on the podcast I'm like, do you think he's underestimating you? And he's like, dude, I don't give a fuck what he does. Like, I'm there to fight. That's my job. That's what I'm getting ready for, and that's that. And yeah, basically, OMalley had said that, yeah, I'm gonna put away this guy, Chito Vera, put him away and then fight so and so, and he was just basically like banking on the fact that he's gonna knock out Vera. So obviously he must feel underestimated, and also let's be honest, I think Chito is a great guy and I appreciate him, but this was kind of like. I mean, this was a big opportunity for him for sure. The UFC certainly gave him a nice fight here, but also the UFC kind of put OMalley in a position, with that sort of ESPN package and all this and that. They were kind of hoping he'd win and kind of put him in a position so that he could succeed and become a bigger star. So, Chito Vera spoiled the party. So in some sort of way, I'm sure he felt like, he was being overlooked here. So it must feel nice for him to get that victory for sure. Also, OMalley had his hair dyed with Ecuadorian colors. I'm sure that didn't sit well on him. He actually tweeted about it post-fight. He's like, yo, with my flag, you don't fuck with it, something like that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was very satisfying to beat OMalley. Let's see. Regardless or how long Volkanovski holds the title, if you had $100 free, I wish, to bet on a fighter, there goes that Chico. To get the 145-pound belt, I'm assuming next, who would it be? Huh. Who would it be? I think Max Holloway. I think Max Holloway. I think if I had to bet money on who would get the next belt or get a hold of the belt next, it would be Max Holloway. I assume that Volkanovski is probably gonna hold on to the belt for a little bit, and I think the person that can probably has the best chance to beat him, Holloway. I think that he kind of changed my mind in that second bout. After that, I think Calvin Kattar is also interesting. He's getting a lot better. I think he could potentially become champion one day. Jaid is an interesting threat as well, but Frankie Edgar gave him a tough fight and kind of exposed some of the, not weaknesses, but where he maybe wasn't so good, which was the ground game. And I think Volkanovski can definitely wrestle his ass off. So styles-wise, it's not a great matchup for him. Chen Sung Young, maybe. Zabit faded in a fight with Kelvin Kattar in a 3-round fight, so I have questions about, 5-rounder. Ortega, again, hasn't fought in 2 years, coming off a loss. I think it's going to be a while for him to get back up there. So I still think Max Holloway will probably, if I had $103 to bet on someone to become the next champion, I think I'd still probably bet on Max Holloway, to be quite honest. That's a weird one, yeah. It's a hard one. All right, I'm going to call it quits here. Got an hour and 4 minutes to be exact. So yeah, that's that's usually how long I like to do these, an hour. So yeah, I'm gonna end it here. So just a quick announcement for my Spanish speakers. I will be dropping a bonus episode tomorrow, and it's going to be an interview with Eric Gojito Perez, who fights this Friday at Bellator 244. So stay tuned to that. It'll drop tomorrow on the Hablemos MMA feed. So make sure you subscribe to Hablemos MMA if you want to get that content. Also, check out the stories for the English speakers. Check out the stories that I did on Brandon Moreno. One came out this morning. I think I have another one coming out. Interesting stuff, man. Interviewed him on Hablemos MMA on Monday's episode, and had a lot of things to say about Cody Garbrandt. That's up on MMAJunkie.com. Quite passionate about him getting skipped over by Garbrandt. So had a lot of things to say about Garbrandt. Also, a little bit of news. He signed a new contract with the UFC. That's kind of, I guess, the UFC's way of, hey, we know you're getting skipped over, but here's a better deal. So he signed a new contract, and he's being kept as a replacement opponent for that Davison Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt title fight. So yeah, it might not be like the best case scenario for Brandon Moreno, but he's still got a new contract. He's still considered a replacement opponent, and if he beats Alex Perez, he's going to be considered the #1 contender according to the UFC matchmakers. So anyways, we talked about all that in detail, and I wrote that in English for MMAJunkie.com from our Spanish language interview. So make sure you check that out, and then also have stuff coming out with Gojito Perez. So something will be coming out of that interview as well in English. So again, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to everyone that submitted questions via Twitter. I don't know why my eye's twitching. And everyone that submitted questions as well on the YouTube live chat. Again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it. Follow me right here on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Danny Segura TV. And yeah, if you share this live Q&A, I'll retweet you and all that. Reshare you on Instagram, etc. So spread the love, all right? Hope you guys have a good week. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Wash your hands, wear a mask, stay safe. Love you all. I'm out of here.